Good afternoon, a very warm welcome back to Summer Seashore Birding Adventures. My name's Rich Mooney and right now I am at REGUA Nature Reserve in the Atlantic Forest of Brazil. And yesterday I got a really good look at a wonderful bird known as a rufous-tailed jacamar, and it really reminded me and highlighted how long it's taken me to finally get out here. Back in 2005, I received an email from my dear friend of over 30 years and birding mentor and ringing tutor Alan Martin, and simply saying, you know, you need to get yourself to Rio. Unfortunately, I wasn't in the position to do that. I was already booked up on a trip to the Upper Texas coast, and life being life, I just never managed to get out here. However, 2026, I've now joined Alan on one of his annual or biannual trips out to the reserve because of his involvement with it. And since we've been here, I've got a species list of over 250 birds. But not only that, I mean, you're just surrounded by the most, incredibly dramatic landscape, wonderful habitat, incredible wildlife, and really lovely people. So before you join us on this 2-week adventure, let me just set the scene a little bit for you. Let me tell you about REGUA and its history, about the charity, and a little bit about us. Though most people commonly refer to the reserve as REGUA, its full name is the Reserva Ecológica de Guapiaçu, and it is located on the humid coastal slope of the Atlantic rainforest, or Mata Atlântica in Portuguese, about a 2-hour drive northeast of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Here in the heart of the Guapiaçu Valley, REGUA also protects part of the Guapiaçu River, after which the reserve is named. The reserve's topography has an altitudinal gradient ranging from 35 metres above sea level to about 2,000 metres. This includes some of the higher peaks of the Serra dos Orgáos region within the boundaries of the reserve, part of the Serra do Mar coastal range, which runs about 1,500 kilometres along the eastern seaboard from Santa Catarina to Rio de Janeiro. Now, this world-class birding destination was founded in 2001 and was born from an idea and a dream of Nicholas and Raquel Locke, who were already protecting part of this globally important area and dedicated to preserve it. This was achieved by some equally visionary independent UK conservationists through the Brazilian Atlantic Rainforest Trust, which was set up to support the project, and the World Land Trust, securing the foundation and its future. Even in its infancy, there was a very clear mission, and that was the long-term conservation of the Atlantic rainforest and its biodiversity in the Guapiaçu watershed in the state of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Now, the map here clearly shows why it is so critical that the work of REGUA continues. The lime green area shows the extent of the original forest, which once ran from Bahia in the north to northeastern Argentina in the south. The darker green area shows what now remains of the original forest, which is unbelievably less than 10% and is highly fragmented. When people think about deforestation, they often think about the Amazon, but far more damage has been done to this highly biodiversity rich habitat. It began with the first European settlers back in the early 1600s who started felling the forests for settlement and trade in Brazilian wood. This was followed by the draining of the wetlands, land being changed for farming and agriculture, and eventually the encroachment of urbanisation. Having direct access to the Atlantic shipping routes proved highly profitable and logistically important, and as a consequence almost 70% of the 213 million people that live in Brazil now live along the eastern seaboard. So at first glance, the enormity of this kind of deforestation seems not only bleak but irreversible. However, there is hope, and this has come in the form of direct action. Over the last 25 years, the incredibly dedicated staff, local communities and committed volunteers at REGUA along with the support of some amazing sponsors, have made a monumental difference. Since its foundation, REGUA has gone from strength to strength, and more land has been acquired for reforestation, which has been successfully replanted with incredible results. Already some of the fragmented and isolated areas have been reconnected, forming corridors in which both avian and terrestrial wildlife can now move, bringing a more balanced and richer biodiversity back to its original state. Of course, there is much more work to be done, but since 2006 over 1 million trees have now been planted, and REGUA owns and protects over 44,000 acres within the reserve. The success of the reforestation and in turn its biodiversity has been accomplished from both great planning and REGUA's own nursery. Timing, weather, ground condition, types of trees, types of seeds and so on are all serious considerations when approaching reforestation. The success in what's already been achieved, which equates to about 90% sapling survival, speaks for itself. Unbelievably, many of the seeds are used for planting have been hand-picked from over 200 species of trees throughout the existing forest by experienced rangers who know the plants and trees as well as the best seeds to select. These are then brought back to the nursery, germinated and cared for until they are all ready to be planted. Amazingly, in collecting these seeds, the team has discovered a new species of tree, previously unknown to science, and has been named Eugenia Guapiaçuana, honouring this wonderful area and reserve, and a sapling from this tree has now been planted close to the headquarters at REGUA. As equally important and part of this amazing ongoing project is the development of its research and education programs. REGUA has its own research facility and accommodation for students and biologists from various institutions and universities who carry out monitoring programs, including in-depth scientific exploration and analysis into all of the flora and fauna within the reserve, particularly the effect on wildlife through reforestation. The reserve's knowledge base is also extremely enhanced by visiting naturalists who bring a wealth of experience, dedication and knowledge and contribute enormously to REGUA's research. One of the main objectives from its beginning was also to develop an environmental education program that encourages knowledge and value of the Atlantic rainforest for the local communities. These include regular school visits to the reserve where there is a wonderful education facility and of course the opportunity for children to connect with nature. Also visits by REGUA's education team to schools implementing hands-on stewardship and involvement for young children and adolescents to become part of the Young Ranger program. Beyond all of the incredible work done on the ground here at REGUA, something else has also emerged from this truly inspiring story, and that is the production and publication of some much needed field guides. The lack of anything at a regional level was apparent, so through hard work by some of the volunteers and staff, these books began to take shape and finally published, covering hawk moths, birds, dragonflies and damselflies and butterflies of the Serra region. They now stand as a foundation point on which continued research can grow, learn and evolve, and are an invaluable resource for students, local naturalists and visitors to REGUA. Located in the Guapiaçu Valley and central to the reserves sits REGUA's Lodge, offering panoramic views of the Serra Mountains. With its villa-like atmosphere and relaxed informal vibe, it is both the starting point for daily adventures and a place of relaxation at the end of a wonderful day's birding. With easy access via trails to the wetlands, lower and higher altitude forest, it really is perfectly positioned. This is where itineraries are planned, totals are tallied, moths discovered, beers shared, and of course friends are made. In terms of accommodation and facilities for visitors, you couldn't ask for anything more. There are 10 rooms, all en suite, and are extremely comfortable, clean and welcoming, which is a relief after a tiring day in the field. There are plenty of other areas to relax and contemplate your day's adventures, with a comfortable lounge, library, and even a swimming pool. The veranda also makes another great area to sit, whether enjoying a morning's coffee or writing up your field notes. Here you're not far from visiting birds and wildlife to the garden, giving you an opportunity to observe and photograph in comfort. Though mornings and evenings tend to be more productive, you will see birds throughout the day, and the hours after dark should not be overlooked, which can bring some other interesting wildlife. While on the subject of nocturnal activities here at REGUA, not only will you be able to participate on a nighttime prowl for owls and giant snipe with REGUA's experienced guide, you will also have the opportunity to take part in an ongoing study of Lepidoptera in the shape of some incredible moths. In October 2013, REGUA constructed the world's first purpose-built moth wall near the lodge and is lit with a mercury vapour lamp. This is a great place to gather and check during the evening and morning to experience and witness the unbelievable variety of moths, praying mantises, dragonflies, geckos and other insects at this location. As is always the case, time of year often dictates what birds are seen regularly, and hummingbirds are no exception. During our stay at the lodge, the 3 main species frequenting the feeders were glittering-throated emerald, violet-capped wood nymph and swallow-tailed hummingbird, with reddish hermit occasionally seen feeding on the bordering flowers. Including our out-of-area excursions, a total of 10 hummingbird species were recorded during our visit. The views from the tower located next to the lodge are simply stunning. Here you look across the reserve, over the wetlands and beyond to the high peaks of the Serra dos Orgáos mountains, all a part of this incredible reserve. This is of course a great vantage point to view a variety of different species that tend to spend much of their time in the upper canopy, giving you the opportunity for observation and photographs. Time spent scanning this area is both rewarding and therapeutic, allowing you to slow down and quietly observe the comings and goings of its inhabitants. Now, most visitors' first contact with a different habitat type beyond the tower, garden and surrounding foliage and trees is the reserve's famous wetland, where part of the Guapiaçu River has been redirected back to its original position, having been moved in the 1960s. Tababua swamp, a rare important habitat type, was also lost due to the removal of the wetlands for fear of malaria spreading, but thankfully it is beginning to return with some successful replanting. And at the wetlands alone, 221 bird species have already been recorded, some of which are endemic to the Mata Atlântica and/or Brazil. There are several well-marked trails around the reserve which are easily accessed from the lodge, giving guests the opportunity to wander safely and navigate the reserve on their own, though REGUA also has an exceptional guide and some rangers that can join you if you wish. This undoubtedly brings great benefits, as they are extremely knowledgeable on bird calls, behaviour and specific areas. There are also a few trails that do require vehicle access and a guide, allowing you to experience far more of the reserve and observe a different group of its avifauna. Visiting birders can also take advantage of some exceptional day trip excursions and experience a host of other interesting areas and habitats. These of course bring a great opportunity not only to see more of the region but also to see a variety of different and localised birds. During our stay we were fortunate enough to go on 4 of these. The montane forest of Macadacima, which produces a remarkable array of higher altitude species and located an hour-and-a-half drive from the lodge. The dry Atlantic forest of Sumiduro, where we searched for the near threatened and endemic to southeast Brazil three-toed jacamar. The Farmland Safari, half-day local birding excursion where we search for a variety of interesting species found throughout this fringe habitat and close to the lodge. And also some night birding, again close to the lodge. The reason we never made it to the other destinations was because we explored 2 other exceptional sites over a period of 3 days. Firstly, a 2-night stay in the wonderful Serra Azul Birding Lodge, located north of Teresópolis, the lodge being about a 2-hour drive from Regua. And a day visit to the incredible Itaroro Eco Lodge near Nova Friburgo, about an hour-and-a-half drive. Though both these destinations are not part of the usual itinerary, Regua is extremely accommodating for visiting birders and supportive of these other lodges, and visits can be arranged when availability allows. So let's just orientate ourselves with a map of the main area again. Regua, Reserva Ecológica de Guapiaçu, lies northeast from Rio de Janeiro. Macadacima is south of Nova Friburgo. Itaroro Eco Lodge to the east, and Sumiduro to the north, while Serra Azul Birding Lodge is located north of Teresópolis. Now, with a species list of between 18 and 1900 bird, Brazil boasts hosting approximately 55 to 60% of all species found in South America, and ranks in the top 3 countries in the world for avian biodiversity, along with Colombia and Peru. The Serra dos Orgáos range, where Regua is located, has a species list of over 500 birds, over 25% of the whole of Brazil. So when you realise that 490 of those species have been recorded within the reserve at Regua, 62 of which are endemics, you begin to grasp why this is such a world-class birding destination. Now, my go-to field guide for the entirety of this trip has been the field guide of the birds of the Serra dos Orgáos and surrounding area by Daniel and Gabriel Mello and Francisco Malé Rodrigues. This regionally important field guide has undoubtedly provided me with the foundation on which to approach this whole new group of avifauna. Unfortunately, this is now out of print. However, a new edition is now available covering southeast Brazil, including helpful distribution maps. Another important book that I found extremely helpful is the Field Guide to the Birds of Brazil by Bervan Perlo, providing more information in certain areas and easy reference from range maps to subspecies comparisons. Finally, Ridgely and Tudor's The Birds of South America. This 2-part volume covering passerines is just fantastic, with beautifully illustrated plates where similar species can be viewed side by side, and more detailed notes on distribution, habitat, behaviour and identification. Fortunately, all of these books can be found in the library at REGUA'S Lodge. By the time I met Alan Martin in 1995, he had already been ringing birds for almost 20 years, beginning in 1976 and inspired by his love of birds and natural history from childhood. He was not only involved in many projects within the UK, but also on some exploratory expeditions abroad. 3 to Senegal, 1 to Thailand and 1 to Israel. In 1997 I joined Alan on a trip to the Isle of Man in Scotland to monitor and ring the island seabirds. And in 2000 Alan and I both travelled out to Fringilla Field Station on the Kurish Spit in Russia, trapping a variety of bird species that use that corridor during migration. For many years, Alan studied the European siskin and its migration, ringing 6,159 individuals from 1984 to 2002 at his home in Surrey, and trapped 202 which were controls from a variety of other countries including Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Finland and Czechoslovakia. Some of his own ringed birds were reported in France, Spain and North Africa. In 2002, the British Trust for Ornithology published their Migration Atlas, the primary resource for understanding the movement of breeding birds in or migrating through Great Britain and Ireland. In this, Alan wrote up an excellent expert account about this wonderful bird. Alan Martin is the Secretary of the Brazilian Atlantic Rainforest Trust and acts as the main coordinator for REGUA project here in Brazil, which he visits regularly and for which he assists with the governance and fundraising. He has published a guide to the hawk moths of the Serra dos Orgáos region and a guide to the butterflies of the same area. He has served as Honorary Treasurer and Council Member for the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, Treasurer and then Chairman of the British Trust for Ornithology, a Trustee of the Butterfly Conservation, Director of Wetlands International and a Council Member of the World Land Trust. He has also served on the board of the Hutan Harapan Conservation Project in Sumatra, Indonesia for 5 years, as well as being a trustee of other local charitable organisations. Now finally, something that is more than worthy of a mention is that the foreword for the Hawk Moths book is by Professor Ian Newton, OBE and Fellow of the Royal Society, arguably one of the most respected English ornithologists of modern time, which not only speaks volumes about the book's contribution and value, but that of the character of the man that wrote it. Now, my own journey and interest with birds started at a very early age during the 1970s, turning into somewhat of an obsession up to my early teens. In 1990, after serving 3 years in the British Army, my pursuit of birds returned, initially with an interest in falconry, but after a move to Alberta, Canada in 1992, I became actively involved with the Strathcona Raptor Shelter, taking a course in wildlife rehabilitation with the Alberta Society for Injured Birds of Prey. In 1994, I took part on a 5-day boat expedition along the Bow River near Calgary to band and monitor the breeding progress of prairie falcons. In 1995 I returned to the UK, got licensed through the British Trust for Ornithology and began my mentorship as a bird ringer under Alan Martin. Over the next 7 years I took part in many different ringing projects with his support, including monitoring and ringing of owls and raptors on Salisbury Plain, mist netting in Dorset and Sussex, ringing Eurasian siskin with Alan and many other interesting projects. Beyond what has already previously been mentioned on the trips to Russia and Scotland, I also joined the Hellenic Ornithological Society's ringing expedition to the island of Antikythera in Greece. From 2002 to 2011, I lived in British Columbia, Canada, initially in the Okanagan Valley, where I served on the board of directors for the Kelowna Bird Club, and 6 years on Vancouver Island. During my time in BC, I took part in breeding bird surveys, led Christmas bird counts, supported the Brant Festival, and took part in the British Columbian Breeding Bird Atlas, where some of my time was spent on Mount Aerosmith as well as on Mount Cain and Mount Albert Edward. In 2011, I returned to the UK, where I now live. Most of my time is spent birding here, though I have taken a few trips to the Gambia, Spain and Greece. In 2015, I joined the Army Ornithological Society's expedition to Ascension Island in the South Atlantic to monitor and ring some of the island seabirds. Over the last few years, in between twitching a few rare birds, I've taken a real interest in historical ornithology, prompted by the outstanding work and literature by Professor Tim Birkhead, and have really enjoyed learning so much about the founding fathers, whose dedication and pursuit of knowledge created the foundation on which we all have benefited. Now, I've arrived in Brazil with a blank slate and an empty notebook, and my first visit to South America. But of course, that soon changed, and my notebook began to fill up with family names I'd only been dreaming about seeing: tanagers, euphonias, antshrikes, manakins, puffbirds, leaf tossers and foliage gleaners, spinetails, tyrants and tyrannulates, hermits and hummingbirds, toucans and trogons, and of course many, many more. Now, if ever there was a perfect pairing of field guide and checklist, it's Leading Gain's checklist of the birds of REGUA. This well thought out diary allows visiting birders to keep tabs on their daily totals and species counts over a 2-week period. It shows at a glance seasonal abundance and difficulty, plus their red list category and endemic status. So yes, I am here for the birds, but during my research leading up to this trip, I realised very quickly that there would be so much more to see and learn at REGUA than I possibly imagined, and now this has far surpassed anything that I ever expected. Interesting bats, capybara, lowland tapir, common marmoset, lurking in the shadows, the broad-snouted caiman, beautiful butterflies, wonderful silk moths, incredible hawk moths, secretive opossums, stunning dragonflies, brown-throated sloths, fascinating orchids, fabulous amphibians, praying mantis, and of course even giant spiders. So now you know a little bit more about the reserve and what to expect. Let's just backtrack to day one, and I'm going to run a trip report that gives you daily updates and highlights.